Today's topic is the conclusion of our Yoga Sutra series, which was on chapter 2 of Patanjali's Sutras. Today's topic is going to be the culmination of those sutras leading up to Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. And that comes from chapter 3. So this will be the concluding talk on this series. Just a quick review. Previously, Patanjali had described the 8 limbs of yoga in each of their necessary disciplines in advancing towards self-realization. In Sutra 29, he stated, Yama niyamasana pranayama pratyahara dharana dhyana samadhayostav angani. The 8 limbs of yoga are yama, the various forms of abstention, niyama, the various observances, asana, posture, pranayama, control of the breath, pratyahara, withdrawal of the mind from sense objects, dharana, concentration, dhyana, meditation, and samadhi, absorption. Now, in sutras 2 and 3, we see the yamas, abstentions, and niyamas, observances, are 2 limbs of the 8 limbs of yoga, delineated in our talks number 8, 9, and 10 in our series, and all of these are on our YouTube channel in this Raja Yoga series. In the previous talk, Patanjali described in detail 5 of the 6 remaining limbs. We come now to asana. In Sutra 46, Patanjali states, Sthira sukham asanam. Posture is that which is firm and comfortable. In the Svetasvatara Upanishad, chapter 2, section 8, verse 10, we read, holding the body steady with chest, neck, and head aligned, then mentally directing the senses to the heart, one who is wise may cross over every fear-laden current on the raft of Brahman. Now, in those days, it had to be very clear what the proper place was. So Svetasvatara explains, in a clean and level place, free of pebbles, fire and dust, free of noise and dampness, calming to the mind and not displeasing to the eye, here sheltered from the wind and retiring into solitude, one should concentrate on the mind. And most of you who have been coming know that we encourage you to keep a shrine space in your home. It can be a separate room, which is ideal, but if not, a separate space, usually where you do not sleep. So it can be in another room and a separate space that you use every day. In Sutra 47, Patanjali states, Prayatna shoy ilyananta samapatibhyam. Posture becomes firm and relaxed through control of the natural tendencies of the body and through meditation on the infinite. So in meditation, we hold the body erect because the mind is clearer and more alert when the spine is straight. And so you yourself can see by sitting straight how you feel as opposed to slumped over. So that spine straight, not touching the back of the chair, but absolutely straight, has an effect on the mind. Also, when the mind becomes absorbed, the kundalini or spiritual current that travels along the spine rises. And when it's bunched over, when we're bunched over in a poor posture, it's not as conducive to that process. In Sutra 48, Patanjali reveals, Tato dvandvana vigataha. Thereafter, one is no longer troubled by the dualities of sense experience. Now we come to pranayama. In Sutra 49, Tasmin sati svasa prashvasa yorgati chetaha pranayamaha. Once this is achieved, there follows breath control of the motion of inhalation and exhalation. So this fourth limb of yoga focuses on controlling the vital forces of the body. And it's important to understand that all the functions and powers of the body, mind, and senses are manifestations of this force of prana. Now, Vivekananda explains that prana is not just breath, though it's usually so translated. He states it is the sum total of the cosmic energy, without and within. It is the energy that is in each body, and its most apparent manifestation is in the motion of the lungs. This motion is caused by prana drawing in the breath, and it is what we seek to control in pranayama. We begin by controlling the breath as the easiest way of getting control of the prana. So all of you are familiar with this process. In Sutra 50, Patanjali tells us, Bahya Pyantara Stamba Vritir Desha Kala Samkhyabhihi Paridrishto Dirga Sukshmaha. The breath may be stopped externally or internally, or checked in mid-motion and regulated according to place, time, and a fixed number of moments, so that the stoppage is either protracted or brief. Now, Patanjali points out that the breath has actually three phases. We're thinking maybe it's just in-breath and out-breath, but no, it's that point in between, that's still, where the direction of the breath then pauses before it changes its direction. So what then is the purpose of pranayama? Well, again, you are all knowledgeable about this, to calm the mind in order to prepare for meditation, and thus rouse the kundalini, which literally means that which is coiled up. That is the serpent power at the base of the spine. Now, the kundalini is a huge reservoir of spiritual energy situated at the base of the spine. And when the kundalini is aroused, it travels up through the 7 centers. These 7 centers are known as chakras. Okay. When the mind is attached to worldliness, it dwells in the 3 lower centers. Those would be the Muladhara, the Swadhisthana, and the Manipura. At the organs of evacuation, generation, and at the navel, which is the seat of power, ambition, that kind of manifestation. So when the mind ascends to the 4th plane, the Anahata center, that is at the heart. And here is where the aspirant first sees light. The 5th center is at the throat center, called the Vishuddha center. And there we find in the lives of Ramakrishna, Sarada Devi, and the direct disciples, that is the center where many spiritual experiences take place. That about this center, when the mind rises to the 5th plane, the aspirant wants to hear only about God. The mind has become extremely elevated. The 6th center is called the Agya center, and that is at the forehead. And this is where the aspirant receives the direct vision of God day and night. Even then, there's a little trace of the ego left in the aspirant. The 7th center is at the top of the head, the Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus in the brain, beyond visions, the knowledge of Brahman. And so we can see that in Raja Yoga, This body-mind complex has only one life force, which expresses itself at different levels of consciousness. No matter what we do throughout the day, this energy is expressing itself. Now in Sutra 51, I've shared with you before, Patanjali tells us Bahya Bhyantara Vishayakshepi Chaturtaha. The fourth kind of pranayama is the stoppage of breath, which is caused by concentration upon the external or internal objects. And Swami Prabhupada loved this photograph of his guru, Swami Brahmananda, because as he was smoking the hubba bubble, his mind had ascended and the breath completely stopped. So it matters not what we are doing that can take place, even smoking a hubba bubble. In the two previous sutras, pranayama takes place by the exercises of the conscious will. However, this fourth kind of pranayama takes place when the aspirant has reached a higher stage of spiritual development through devotion to God. And during meditation, the breath may stop of its own accord when the aspirant is deeply absorbed in concentration. It occurs when a spiritual aspirant is advanced enough in his or her practice to be able to support this internal suspension of breath. So this is an advanced sadhaka. So now we come to the stages of concentration. Sutra 52. Tatak shiyate prakasha varanam. As a result, the covering of the inner light of the chitta is removed. And remember, this chitta, there are several definitions of the mind. This chitta is the lake of the mind, where everything is dumped. Your memories, your emotions, your thoughts, just everything fleeting is there in the lake of the mind. But when we step back in a pratyahara meditation, we watch that lake of the mind. And that pratyahara helps us to gather the forces of the mind so that we can disengage from that unmindful mind. And then we can withdraw the mind into the heart. Swami Prabhupada explains, the inner light is the light of spiritual discrimination between the real and the unreal. The covering is made up of ignorance produced by our past karmas. In Sutra 53, Patanjali explains, Dharanasu chayogata manasaha. The mind then gains the power of concentration. In Sutra 54, and this is just a review going rather quickly, Shaya samprayoge chitta swarupanukara evendriyanam pratyaharaha. When the mind is withdrawn from sense objects, the sense organs also withdraw themselves from their respective objects and thus are said to imitate the mind. This is known as pratyahara. And so that watching the lake of the mind and then detaching from that lake and then reorienting that higher mind called the buddhi into the heart is a very important preliminary practice to meditation. Vivekananda explains, the organs are separate states of the mind stuff. I see a book. The form is not in the book outside. It is in the mind. Something is outside which calls that form up. The real form is in the chitta. So if we could even remember that, that's a great help in reorienting ourselves just in everyday life. The organs, he said, identify themselves with and take the form of whatever comes to them. If you can restrain the mind stuff from taking those forms, the mind will remain calm. This is called pratyahara. And this pratyahara is, again, usually what we practice at the beginning of meditation when we're sitting, but also it can be practiced throughout the day. Especially when we're in an agitated state, we can just focus on understanding that what's out there is out there, and using the higher mind to disassociate with what is actually an object in the mind. What are some of the techniques of pratyahara? To thoroughly understand the nature of sense perception, as stated in Vivekananda's previous commentary, that detaches us from our sensate preoccupation with it. For the first few minutes of our sitting, I mentioned we can practice Vivekananda's mindfulness meditation. And many of you are familiar with this in our Raja Yoga class. We begin with this. And it is something that he gave in his Raja Yoga classes. To witness the thoughts, impressions, memories, emotions that are going on in the mind until the mind becomes embarrassed and quiets of its own accord. The mind doesn't like to be watched in this way. So when we watch the mind, we can then detach from the mind and thereby gain control of the mind. And we see the mind for what it is, a mad monkey, drunk and stung by a bee. All of those things is what the mind is. So we see how our thoughts rise and fall, and we understand that they're impermanent, unstable, non-eternal, subtle matter. We don't need somebody telling us this. We experience this for ourselves, and that is empowering. We see then firsthand that we're not the mind, and that in itself is a radical truth. It gives us tremendous incentive. The fact that we can watch the mind with the higher subjective mind, the mindful mind, the witness, is extremely empowering. And it also proves that the lower mind can be objectified. And we all know, science tells us that that which can be perceived is matter. So in other words, this mind that has been holding us by the nose and dragging us around is really subtle matter. Therefore, it cannot be this I. So the mind calms itself of its own accord, and we can then gather the forces of the mind and place the mind in the heart. And you all do it yourself. You don't have to help you through this process. It's something that you can do just by remembering Vivekananda's calming the lake of the mind meditation. Now in Sutra 55, Patanjali tells us, Tata Parama Vasyandriyanam. From this arises complete mastery over the senses. And now we come into the third chapter, which is on dhyana and samadhi. And we'll approach this through Rishi Patanjali. One commentator, Devadatta Kali, enlightens aspirants by delineating the varying points of focus of the 8 limbs of yoga. The first limb is the yamas, self-restraint, and that orients aspirants by delineating the varying points of focus and allows us to correct our relationships with the outside world. Self-restraint are the yamas. Next are the 4 limbs, the niyamas, the observances. Now, all of these are important. And those of you who have attended the Raja Yoga classes know how much we review these yamas and niyamas because they are as important as meditation. In fact, without practicing these, we really cannot become advanced enough to even sit quietly. All of these yamas and niyamas are extremely important as part of our everyday practice. We find asana, pranayama, and pratyahara, withdrawal of the mind from the external world, takes the aspirant inwards. Now, the sixth limb, dharana, concentration, which literally means holding, occurs in the third chapter of the Yoga Sutra on powers of the mind. It tells us to first redirect our attention to a single inner point and then hold it there. Now, those of you who have been initiated by a guru understand where the guru is asking you to meditate. Usually it's in the heart center, and he gives you all of the directions around that. But why the chapter break between the fifth and the sixth limbs, given that the 8 limbs of yoga form a complete unit, we might ask? Devadatta Kali explains, this break marks the turning point in the flow of consciousness away from the outer world of the objects and towards the inner realm of pure subjective awareness. It is that inner realm that the third chapter explores. So chapter 3, verse 1, Patanjali explains, Desha bandhas chittasya dharana. Concentration is holding the mind on one particular object. Vivekananda explains, dharana, concentration, is when the mind holds on to some object, either in the body or outside the body, and keeps itself in that state. So again, the basic instructions are given by the guru, but we find helpful hints in the lives of the saints and the seers. Ramakrishna tells us how to guide the mind into the state of concentration. He says, in order to learn archery, one should first aim at a banana tree, then at a reed, then at a wick, and last at a flying bird. At the beginning, one should concentrate on God with form. So that is a very clear idea of how the mind, meditating on a gross form, gross meaning on a physical form of one's chosen ideal, one makes the mind more and more subtle. Swami Brahmananda gives us another helpful preliminary instruction by saying, wake up early in the morning, wash yourself and choose a firm seat. Command your mind in this way, mind, keep still, let no distractions enter. And with the strength of the intelligent will, keep the mind under control. Soon it will become concentrated. Then no distractions will arise. If that doesn't work, he advised, before you begin your meditation, read devotional scriptures. This will help you to concentrate your mind on God. And Swami Sarvadevananda, when he was asked by one aspirant, I don't have much time to meditate. My life is so busy. When should I meditate? And Swami was very, very firm. In the morning, he said. So in other words, before you begin your day, you form your day in your mind and in your heart before you begin. The obstacles are many, even in this initial stage, and I don't need to talk to you about obstacles. Those of you who meditate well know. And Swami Turiyananda describes them for us. Just as when we go on a road trip, we research to find out what is the fastest, most scenic route in our destination, free from the road work or accidents. So also, it's wise to educate ourselves about frequent obstacles on the path of concentration of the mind. Excuse me. So Turiyananda Swami explains, there are several obstructions to concentration. Laya. vikshepa, kashaya, rasavada. So laya, he says, is the mind being overcome by tamas, inertia. The mind falls asleep and loses consciousness. Most aspirants are held down by laya. And in Santa Barbara, our temple was open to the public from morning meditation, 6 o'clock in the morning until 7:30 at night. Many visitors would come, and we'd see, they were very sincere, but many would fall asleep. And then they'd come to us in the bookstore and say, I had a most wonderful meditation in the temple. Well, no doubt the temple in Santa Barbara has a wonderful vibratory presence, but that, of course, laya is not meditation. Turiyananda Swami goes on, vikshepa is the scattering of the mind on multifarious objects. Kashaya is finding meditation distasteful. One feels disinclined to meditate, but one must still persist. So yes, if we establish a routine, then that routine pulls us to our little shrine. Rasavada, he said, is the mind being fascinated by the vision of divine forms and refusing to ascend higher. So when experience does come, we enjoy that and we like to revisit that, but then we can get stuck there without progressing. So these great sages help us understand what happens on the spiritual path and how to overcome these obstacles. Swami Shivananda sympathizes with the aspirant. He says, it is a bit difficult to have concentration in the initial stages. Meditation becomes more natural when one gets real love for God as a result of his grace and one's constant prayer and japa. And japa, of course, is repetition of the holy name. Swami Turiyananda also encouraged by divulging the result. One can explain a thing if one has a clear grasp of it, which is the outcome of concentration, he said. By concentrating on a subject, its inner secrets are revealed. Sutra 2. Tatra pratyayai katanata dhyanam. Meditation is an unbroken flow of thought toward the object of concentration. Unbroken. So the difference between concentration and meditation lies in two things, duration and intensity. Some commentators attribute concentration to 12 seconds of unbroken thought. And if you think, oh, I can do that, well, it's not so easy. If you're really an experienced meditator, you understand the different levels of the mind, what's going on in the mind. And so to achieve an unbroken flow of thought, there comes with that an inner joy, what's called the joy of concentration. Now, meditation is a little more prolonged and intense. And my teacher said it's 12 times 12 seconds, which is closer to 2.5 minutes, wherein an aspirant feels a more intense joy and a qualitative difference in that state. Vivekananda explains, the mind tries to think of one object, to hold itself to one particular spot as the top of the head, the heart, etc. And if the mind succeeds in receiving the sensations only through that part of the body and through no other part, that would be dharana. And when the mind succeeds keeping itself in that state for some time, it is called dhyana. Swami Prabhavananda describes the yogic perspective of meditation. It says meditation is prolonged concentration. The process of meditation is often compared to the pouring of oil from one vessel to another in a steady, unbroken stream. We have seen, and as we have seen in Sutra 2, that Patanjali defines thought as a wave in the mind. So ordinarily, he says, wave arises, remains in the mind for a moment, and then subsides, to be succeeded by another wave. In the practice of meditation, however, succession of identical waves are raised in the mind, and this is done so quickly that no one wave is allowed to subside before another similar wave arises to take its place. The effect is therefore one of perfect continuity. Sutra 3. Tad evarta matra nirbhasam swarupa sunyam eva samadhihi. When in meditation, the true nature of the object shines forth, not distorted by the mind of the perceiver, that is absorption, samadhi. So ordinary human perception is normally and colored by the perceiver's imagination and preconception. All of this is going on in the mind as we go about our ordinary life. The mind is very, very busy. Only in samadhi, which is a supersensuous state of direct knowledge, do we see an object as it truly is. And that is why Naren asked Ramakrishna, "Sir, have you seen God?" And the master replied, "Yes, I have seen God. I see him more clearly than I see you standing here." Now again, Swami Prabhupada explained, Sri Ramakrishna meant that he saw God in samadhi, while he saw Vivekananda with the eyes of ordinary sense perception, which must necessarily retain a measure of distortion. So it is complete union in samadhi of seeing, a very different type of seeing. Sutra 4, Trayam ekatra samyamaha. When these three, concentration, meditation, and absorption, are brought to bear on one object, they are called samyama. Again, Vivekananda. And I'm drawing on Vivekananda a lot from his Raja Yoga commentary. It's a wonderful commentary on the Yoga Sutras. He says, when a man can direct his mind to any particular object and fix it there, and keep it there for a long time, separating the object from the internal part, this is samyama, or dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, one following the other and making one. The form of the thing has vanished, and only its meaning remains in the mind. So that is real seeing. Sutra 5. Kajayat pragya lokaha. Through mastery of samyama comes the light of knowledge. Swami Sarvagatananda, who was the former head of the Boston and Providence centers, explained in his Yoga Sutra commentary, Pragyaloka means the sphere or world of pure consciousness where the I is lost. In other words, pure awareness devoid of any ego sense. The light of that consciousness illumines one's entire being. Now, what does that mean? Vivekananda again. When one has succumbed in making this samyama, all powers come under his control. This is the great instrument of the yogi. He then guides the student, Vivekananda. The objects of knowledge are infinite, and they are divided into the gross, grosser, grossest, and the fine, finer, finest, and so on. This samyama should be first applied to gross things. And when you begin to get knowledge of this gross, slowly by stages, it should be brought to finer things. So this makes perfect sense. And this usually comes through the direction of the guru as well. So that's why most people are encouraged to meditate in the beginning on the form of God. By mastering supersensuous concentration and meditation on any object of our focus, we gain knowledge. And through this yogic medium of samyama, we understand that such knowledge is power. Okay. Sutra 6. Tasya bhumishu viniyogaha. It must be applied stage by stage. So this spiritual life is very systematic. And here Vivekananda cautions us. This is a note of warning not to attempt to go too fast. Why is that? Swami Prabhupada explains, it is no use attempting meditation before we have mastered concentration. It is no use trying to concentrate on subtle objects until we are able to concentrate upon the gross ones. Any attempt to take a shortcut to knowledge of this kind is exceedingly dangerous. One may, for example, obtain certain psychic experiences while under the influence of drugs, but such experiences, so gained, can bring no lasting spiritual benefits. So again, the advantage of being in a convent where we had a temple and being situated in our bookstore, we saw many instances of this where some people went off their heads without the guidance of a guru. So it's very, very important to follow a teacher's instruction. The Vishnu Purana teaches a practice of meditation in stages, beginning with the worship of God with form and ending in the realization of oneness of the Atman with Brahman. The Purana states, meditate on Vishnu, the dweller in the hearts of all beings, seated on a lotus within the rays of the sun. His body is luminous, adorned with diadem, necklace, earrings, and bracelets of greater luster, and holding conch shell and mace in his hands. Then the wise man should meditate upon the luminous, benign form of the Lord, without the conch shell and mace, but adorned with ornaments. As the mind becomes concentrated on the form, he must then keep his mind on the form without ornaments. Then he must meditate upon his oneness with the luminous form of the Lord. Lastly, he must let the form vanish and meditate upon the Atman. So we see how the mind is systematically brought into subtler and subtler planes of consciousness. Sutra 7, Patanjali tells us, Trayam antar angam purvebhyaha. These three disciplines are more internal, direct aids to experience than those that precede. So with spiritual powers come challenges. We can easily be tempted by powers of the mind, which divert us from the spiritual path and stunt our spiritual development. Powers, his omniscience or omnipotence, do not bring us liberation. And Swami Swahananda shared with us, and when he was in the first flush of monasticism, he studied Raja Yoga and he gained psychic powers. He could read the minds of people. And in fact, on occasion, we were very aware that he still had that ability, which he used when he had to. But when he was a young monk, he would go to Vrindavan to meet Swami Saradeshananda, disciple of Holy Mother. He was the head of the Delhi Center, Swami Swahananda at that time. And he would go to the hospitals And he really loved to see the patients touch them. And by his touch, they became better. But when Swami Deshananda found out about this, he told him, no, don't use your powers in this way. So he gave them up and passed that story on to us, for us to pass on to you. So we also maybe become very proud of what we have in terms of powers. But pride is a wake-up call that we have not adequately purified the mind and the senses through the cultivation of the initial yamas and niyamas. Okay. Now, if you're in a family setting, if you're husband and wife, your co-partners on a spiritual path, you can help each other in this matter. In a convent, certainly, in a monastery, we can help each other with this, in a family. And so this is an important stage for us to overcome. Our entire body-mind complex must first be strengthened by the cultivation of virtues in order that we may be able to hold spiritual experiences that are yet to come. Vivekananda tells us, these three, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, do not make the mind nirvikalpa free from modifications, but leave the seeds of future embodiment. Only when the seeds are, as the yogi says, fried, do they lose the possibility of producing further plants. These powers cannot fry the seeds. Sutra Tad api bahirangam nirbijasya. But even they, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, are external to the seedless samadhi. So we're told this highest samadhi is the goal. Swami Prabhupada explains the practice of samyama, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, leads to the lower samadhi, the vision of God. And there are different levels of visions of God. But the seedless samadhi, nirvikalpa, demands a further and even more intense spiritual effort. Patanjali next addresses nirvikalpa samadhi. He says, when the vision of the lower samadhi is suppressed by an act of the conscious will, of the conscious control, so that there are no longer any thoughts or visions in the mind, that is the achievement of control of the thought waves of the mind. And this is what graphically took place in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. Totapuri came from the Punjab, searching for a sadhu with features showing he was ready to be initiated into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Sri Ramakrishna was waiting for him. Totapuri said to him, you seem to be highly qualified. Are you interested in Nirvikalpa Samadhi? And Sri Ramakrishna replied in his characteristic way, my mother knows. He went then to the Kali temple and asked Mother Kali, and came back and said, yes, my mother agrees. In 3 days' time, his mind was destroyed. The master was given directions, first of all, to stop the formation of the vrittis, the thought waves in the mind. But instead, he saw the luminous form of Mother Kali and got stuck there. 3 times he tried, and times he got stuck. And finally, he said, I can't go beyond my mother. Totapuri then took glass and pierced the skin between his eyebrows and told Sri Ramakrishna to meditate on that sensation. Now, why, we may ask? Well, the sensation was so piercing, Sri Ramakrishna could not take his mind away from it, nor allow it to be taken away. Chakra, the doorway to the absolute. So this is the agya. When Sri Ramakrishna again saw Mother Kali, the pratyaya of the Divine Mother. He continued to concentrate on the piercing sensation instead, and thus merged into nirvikalpa samadhi. What happened? There was no mind to create a vritti. And here we have a picture of Sri Ramakrishna in nirvikalpa samadhi. Vivekananda went to get a photographer, told him to come to Dakshineshwar. He asked Ramakrishna to come to the veranda, and he engaged him in spiritual talk. And he knew that when he would do this, he would go into samadhi. And sure enough, he did. And so he told the photographer to quickly come and take a photo. And when the photographer came, he tried to adjust Sri Ramakrishna's body, but his entire form lifted off the ground. And Swami Vivekananda said, quick, just take the photo. And so he did. And later, when Sri Ramakrishna saw the photo, he admitted that was a very high state of nirvikalpa samadhi. And so what happened in that state? There was no mind to create. This experience also refers to sutra in the first chapter, Sutra 18, when Patanjali tells us, Brahmaprana ayabhyasa purva samskara shesho nyaha. There is another samadhi which is attained by the constant practice of the cessation of all mental activity, in which the chitta retains only the manifested impressions. So now we come to the yoga technique. Virama pratyaya abhyasa purvaha. Continued effort to still all thoughts until the last link between this world and nirvikalpa, in other words, asmita, meditation on the I amness, is removed with aham brahmasmi, I am Brahman. No one can express what happens to oneself because the mind is not there. The vritti that helps to translate our experience into words. In Sutra 10, Patanjali tells us, Tasya prashanta vahita samskarat. With this pressure of thought waves becomes continuous, the mind's flow is calm. Sutra 11. When all mental distractions disappear and the mind becomes one-pointed, it enters the state called samadhi. Sutra 12. The mind becomes one-pointed when the impression that is past and that which is present are similar. Now, what does this mean? Vivekananda explains, how are we to know that the mind has become concentrated? Because the idea of time will vanish. The more time passes unnoticed, the more concentrated we are. And all of you must have had some experience when you've become so concentrated, you weren't aware of time. It slipped away, and suddenly when you came back to normal consciousness, oh, and you could have been writing, you could have been engaged in artwork, you could have been engaged in anything specific, but the absorption itself stopped time to some extent. And imagine how much more so in samadhi. Vivekananda. In common life, we see that when we are interested in a book, we do not note the time at all. And when we leave the book, we are often surprised to find how many hours have passed. All time will have the tendency to come and stand in the one present. So the definition is given. When the past and present come and stand in one, the mind is said to be concentrated. Now, the distinction among the three kinds of concentration previously mentioned in aphorisms 9, 11, 12 is as follows. Sutra 9. The disturbed impressions are merely held back, but not altogether obliterated by the impressions of control which just come in. So that is the beginning. Sutra 11. The former are completely suppressed by the latter, which stand in bold relief. And then Sutra 12. While in the third, which is the highest, there is no question of suppressing, but only similar impressions succeed each other in a stream. So this is samadhi. What happened to the mind after nirvikalpa samadhi? Patanjali tells us in Sutra 13, Etana bhutendriyeshu dharma lokshana vastha parinama vyakyataha. In this state, it passes beyond the three kinds of changes which take place in subtle or gross matter, and in the organs, change of form, change of time, and change of condition. What does this mean? Vivekananda explains, by the threefold changes in the mind stuff, as to form, time, and state are explained the corresponding changes in gross and subtle matter and in the organs. He goes on, suppose there is a lump of gold. It is transformed into a bracelet and again into an earring. These are changes to form. The same phenomenon that from the standpoint of time gives us change as to time. Again, the bracelet or earring may be bright or dull, thick or thin, and so on. This is change as to state. Now, referring to aphorisms 9, 11, and 12, he says, the mind stuff is changing into vrittis. This is change as to form. That it passes through past, present, and future moments of time is change as to time. That the impressions vary as to intensity within one particular period, say, the present, is change as to state. The concentrations taught in the preceding aphorisms were to give the yogi a voluntary control over the transformations of the mind stuff, which alone will enable him to make the sum named in Sutra 4, namely to direct his mind to any particular object and fix it there, and then keep it there for a long time, separating the object from the internal part, attaining dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, one following the other, and making one. The form of the thing has vanished, and only its meaning remains in the mind. In other words, we become one with that internal reality. In other words, Swami Prabhupada summarizes the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi by saying in his sutra commentary, the thought waves may be of different kinds, may refer to different periods of time, may vary in intensity, but the mind in the state of samadhi is beyond all three kinds of change. Another perspective of this state of nirvikalpa was told to me by a brother monk who reminded Swami Nirvanananda, who had been Swami Brahmananda's intimate attendant. Swami Nirvanananda was Guru Bhai of my Guru, and it was a great blessing to meet this wonderful holy man. So this young monk asked him, on Swami Brahmananda's deathbed, Maharaj said to you, Suji, you have served me well. I give you the boon of Brahmagyana. And this young monk asked, Maharaj gave you this boon. Have you attained that state? Now that's pretty brazen. You usually don't ask those kinds of questions. But Swami Nirvanananda, he was then vice president of the order, he replied, through Sri Ramakrishna's will and the grace of the Guru, I have surrendered everything. But have you attained that state of Brahmagyana? The monk persisted, twice more. And all three times, Swami Nirvanananda repeated, through Sri Ramakrishna's will and the grace of the Guru, I have surrendered everything. So this monk was absolutely luminous. It was such a blessing to be in his presence. Just the presence alone transmits to those around such a great blessing. never owning anything in spiritual life, just only surrendering. So from such a close-up example, we see that such a great soul is egoless, never claiming such a life-transforming experience to be due to his own self-effort. Never. And those who have surrendered everything and whom the ego has entirely dissolved, there is infinite space for the vast ocean of pure consciousness to enter. And I would like to end with this from the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, verses 70 to 72. Sri Krishna describes the state of mind of a Brahmagyani. Water flows continually into the ocean, but the ocean is never disturbed. Desire flows into the mind of the seer, but he is never disturbed. The seer knows peace. The man who stirs up his own lusts can never know peace. He knows peace who has forgotten desire. He lives without craving, free from ego, free from pride. This is a state of enlightenment in Brahman. A man does not fall back from it into delusion. Even at the moment of death, he is alive in that enlightenment. Brahman and he are one. Om, peace, peace, peace.
Good morning. It's really good to see everybody here. We've had some very few faces the last couple of sessions due to the holiday and Mother's Day, and I was trying not to take it personally, but it's really good to see everybody's face. So we've been on a couple of months' journey through the 2nd chapter of the Yoga Sutras. And it by far, as a teacher, is what I rely on for my own practice as well as in my teaching, because it is really the essence of the path that we've been given and offered to have an understanding of what we're doing and where we are. And it can be difficult, I think, sometimes when you're trying to transverse this spiritual life. And sometimes while we have community, we still have to be with ourselves every single day, trying to figure out what's next and how we're doing. So it's easy to get into the 1st chapter, of course, is much more, erudite and high-minded, if you will, what we all aspire to. The 2nd chapter is really so much more about the reality of living every day. That's why I love it. So I want to go back to the very first sutra, which is Kriya Yoga, in which Patanjali talks about the importance of practice, discipline, that we must practice every day, if possible. And what that practice encompasses is what makes up the limbs, the 7 limbs of yoga. And then we must reflect. We must bring ourselves to what it is that we are learning and how we are applying that to our life. How are we using our practice to increase our spiritual connection and understanding? And then finally, and probably most importantly, to remember that we're connected. We are the divine. And so we give back our practice to the divine. And without each of those 3 steps, any one of them left out, our practice or our path will just be a little less clear and maybe a little slower. I don't know. That's, we can't live 2 lives to know, right? We can only live this one life. So today we're going back to those roots. We're going to do a practice where we are again really looking and discerning in our bodies what we are experiencing. So that is the reflection, the second part of the three parts of the reflection. And I'm pausing because it seems so obvious what that is. You know, it's like we all know what our experience is, right? But we rarely really go into it deeply in a way that it informs us and allows us to see something we haven't already seen or think that we already know. And it is that seeing, that insight, that is what pushes us forward. It makes each day different. Otherwise, it becomes, or it can become, very mechanical, where we're just doing the same thing, hoping for something to happen, hoping to grow, hoping that we will suddenly become transformed. But it really does take our active, very active participation in that reflection of what is actually happening. Not what we think is happening, not what we wish were happening, but what's actually happening, even if we don't like it. And sometimes those are the best times. Those are the most powerful growths. So as we have done every session, we will start with a body scan. So if you will close your eyes, we're going to include the breath with this. And if you can, sit up away from the back of your chair. Use your own body as your support to lift up out of the low back, up away from the back of the chair, unless you need that. And to just feel your feet, the support of the ground, the support of the chair. And over the next 4 or 5 breaths, as you inhale, sweep your awareness from your feet up all the way to the crown of your head. And as you exhale, sweep the awareness down from the crown of the head back to the feet. Try to remain more in a witnessing consciousness and just notice what shows up for you. So exhale your breath completely. And as you inhale, sweep your awareness up through your body slowly. When you reach the crown, exhaling slowly. And just repeat that about 4 more times. Noticing tensions, pains, space, sensations. And then when you've completed those 5 breaths, allow your breath to just be its natural self, its natural rhythm. With the eyes closed, just notice what's present right now in your body, what you feel, what you notice through that body scan. Maybe you feel a little more relaxed, or you could even feel a little anxious. Maybe something showed up you didn't realize was there, that was a little scary. What shows up is not nearly as important as that you notice that it showed up. And then create an intention for yourself for this time, for just these next 20 minutes or so, around this idea of noticing, experiencing, and being present to that experience, being very honest, practicing satya, truthfulness with yourself, not for the purpose of being hard on yourself, but for the purpose of your own spiritual understanding and growth. So make your intention something that is positive. And when I say positive, I mean said in the present time, and something that you desire to be true, not something you don't want, but something you do, like I am healthy and spiritually transforming right now. Then bring your hands to your heart and bow your head to your heart. And just salute the teacher within. And then go ahead and come back. And we'll move. Movement is what changes us, of course. So we want to move to free up our stress and tension and to get more space in the body. So we're actually going to stand up. And you want to just have a little bit of room around you. So don't feel confined to your little bitty chair space. You know, feel free to spread out a little bit. And just take your feet a little wider than your pelvis. And we're just going to start by swaying back and forth on our feet. You can move your arms or you don't have to move your arms. I just want you to feel how you're transferring your weight from one leg to the other. Now we're going to start to speed this up a little bit. So we do get a little more stretch. So we're going to start to reach to one side. And as you do, turn your leg that's the opposite to the direction that you're stretching or reaching. Now we're going pretty fast with not really much awareness of our breathing. So I want you to now start to think about your breath. So inhale and reach, exhale and come back. Inhale and reach, exhale, come back. So when we join our breath with our movement, we have to slow down. When we slow our bodies down, we slow our minds down. When we slow our minds down, then we begin to see things that weren't available before. So let's take the arms all the way overhead now. Inhale up, exhale back, inhale up, exhale back. And start to feel that you're reaching a little further than you naturally would, so you can feel those muscles really beginning to warm up. Okay. Let's do just one more to each side. And then we'll come back to the center. Keep your legs apart and your feet kind of turned out. And I know you're kind of maybe a little crowded there in the middle. So just do the best you can, but inhale, take your arms up. And exhale, just bend your knees a little bit and swoop down. Inhale, reach up, look up as you exhale, bend your knees a little bit, round your back. And inhale, reach. This really gets the breath flowing, going a little deeper than it does naturally. And this really starts to get our gunas stimulated, kind of begins to loosen up all of that tamasic, heavy energy. And last time, exhale. And let's stop on an inhale. And just exhale, arms by your side. Okay, so let's go ahead and sit down and just feel that energy, right? It's amazing how just a little bit of movement really makes a big difference. So now just taking your hands onto your knees with your feet flat. So it's always a good idea in yoga asana to focus on the spine. So we want to move the spine. That houses your nervous system. Your nervous system determines pretty much how you experience the world. So we need to keep it in good shape. So we'll start with cat-cow. So inhaling, really arching the back, looking up. And as you exhale, tuck your chin, kind of pull your tailbone underneath you to round your back. And just go back and forth with your breath again, feeling your spine. This is one of my students' most favorite poses. It gets rid of so much stress and tension in the back while it is strengthening all the muscles on the front and the back of your trunk. And it's usually, for most people, pleasurable to do. It's a great one if you work at a desk a lot. Just pause during your day. Do a little cat-cow. Too many people will laugh. Maybe they'll even join you. So I'm hearing some really good breathing going on out there. Makes my heart happy. And with cat-cow, you can do as much as you like. Sometimes you're going to need more than at other times, especially early in the morning. More is generally feels better than little. And then coming back to mountain pose, separate your feet a little bit. Let's circle the hips. So now really focusing more in the low back, getting a little bit of side to side movement in the spine. So the spine really has 5 different ways it can move. Move forward, back, an extension, and in a twist, and laterally. And we want to try to move the spine in all of those directions every day to keep it supple and healthy. And then let's reverse. And in the East, they say, you're as young as your spine is. Okay, so now we'll do the rotating movement. So we'll come all the way back up. And sitting tall again, take an inhale. And as you exhale, twist around to the right and continue to focus on your breath, even as you're holding the pose. Inhaling, lengthening up through the spine. Exhale. You can go a little further if that feels right for you. But focus your twist up around your ribs and your upper back more than the low back. Those low back vertebrae are not really designed for rotation as much as your rib cage area is. And then hold the twist, but just turn the head back to the left and kind of look over the left shoulder. And then turn it back to the right, look over the right shoulder. And then back to the left, keeping the shoulders relaxed. It's always that we want to keep our breath smooth. Yoga is not exercise. I don't care what anybody says. Yoga is not exercise. Yoga goes to a much, much deeper part of us. Now, go ahead and untwist, but hold on to the outside of your right leg. Take your right arm up, side bend to the left. And again, when you do a strong stretch, a lot of times we hold our breath, so be aware of that and intentionally take a nice full inhale and feel yourself getting longer as you take that big inhale. And as you exhale, hold the extension and draw your navel back to push the air out. Inhale, get long. Exhale, push the air out. One more, inhale. And exhale. And then sweep that right arm back down and come back to mountain pose. Take a moment to notice how your sides are a little different now. Right side a little bit more open. So let's go ahead and do the other side. So twisting to the left and getting nice and tall as you inhale. Exhale, using your limbs, your arms to help you to turn a little more. We never want to use our limbs like weapons against ourselves, but we do use them to go a little deeper, to experience our bodies a little more fully than we can without the help of our limbs. And then turn the head back to the right. And then around to the left. Just go back and forth a few times on your own, just kind of taking note of the condition of your neck today. You feel like you have a free and full range of motion? Or is there some blockage, tension, tightness in the neck? Maybe you had an accident at some point that your neck has never really felt quite the same. This can really help over the long term to loosen it up. And then holding on with your right arm, go ahead and take your left arm and reach it to the right. Just take a second or two to kind of get used to the shape. Stretch on the left side, and then inhale and elongate. Really reach. And then hold that reach as you exhale, pulling your navel back. Inhale. Exhale, pull the navel back. One more breath. And then bring that left arm forward and down and just grab hold with that hand around your back, tuck your chin, and really feel the stretch across the tops of your shoulders. So if you carry a lot of your stress in your shoulders, this is really nice to help some of that to dissipate. And then inhale, sitting up tall, take your arms up and overhead. And we're simply going to come back down, but put the other arm on top, if you can remember. And round again. And then come back. So I like to try to organize my teaching around the opposite of what we do with our bodies every day. So what are we doing with our bodies every day? We live on the front of our body. We're usually in a forward bend all the time. So what we need is this part to get open. So let's reach back and grab the back of the chair. So if you can sit a little forward on your chair seat so your elbows are straight, and you want to make this really simple. Keep your shoulders relaxed, and all you have to do, lean. Just lean forward. Keep your head up. You don't, because if you do this, you're liable to round in your upper back. We want to keep the chest as open as we can. So you want to look kind of forward. The stretch will be deeper. So just know that, and it's okay. It's good. And just feel across your collarbones and across the center of your chest. And as you inhale, try to bring your inhale from way down at the base of your belly up into your collarbones. And as you exhale, just draw the navel back. Feel how you shorten on the front of your body. Inhale. Bring it all the way up and spread and open your chest. One more. Inhale. And then release the arms. Okay. So we're going to do a shoulder stretch again to get this upper body open. So let's take the arms up and just bend your right elbow. So just notice any tightness along your tricep muscle back here. A lot of times our arms get really tight as we go along. And we're going to add to this. This part is optional, but I get, give it a try. I'm going to stand up just so you can see what I'm doing. So got my palm of my hand facing my back. I'm going to release the other arm, and you want to reach it back and reach for your other hand. Now you're not likely to touch. Been doing this a long time. If you can, great, but don't worry if you can't. And if you can't, you may be down here like this. I don't want you to overstretch your shoulders. So keep your hand low, but you just want to feel that you're stretching this arm that's in back, right? Okay. So whichever version you're in, reach your elbows away from one another and elongate your spine. Just feel those shoulders as they're doing opposite things. And you'll really feel this when you come out in a good way, I hope. Exhale, release, and just take both arms up now. Bend your other arm, and probably, since I was mirroring before, so your left arm should be up, not your right like mine. And then when you're ready, just reach back. And again, just go for the clasp if you can't. And just take your arm just so you feel the stretch on the other side. This is called Gomukhasana. I did not name these. This is cow face pose. You figure that one out. It looks like a cow face to you. Okay. And then we'll release, stretch both arms up again. Take your arms just about shoulder height, interlace your fingers, take your palms away, and go up. This time, reach up through your index finger mound as well as your thumb mound. Gently pull back on your little finger side of your hand. So you're kind of pulling the back of the arm down into your shoulder blade while you really stretch your armpit. Again, all of this really enhances your breath, but this is also very good for your lymphatic system. Lymph system doesn't have its own pump. It requires you to move, and your lymph system intimately part of the immune system. So it keeps us healthy. Coming down, change the interlace to your non-dominant. Okay, so it should feel weird. So if you don't know, just do your normal interlace, and then just take your first finger and put it on top and let all the rest of them follow. And then push out and go up. Feel the lengthening again on the front of your body and the slight shortening on the back of your body. So you are giving your body what it doesn't get every day, more than likely, unless you're intentionally doing it. Our lifestyle just does not ask us to strengthen our back body. It's always shortening the front body. And then coming down. So we'll go forward to stretch. We do need to now counter some of that. So we're going to go forward and just slide your hands down as far as they'll comfortably go. Release your head and feel the stretch now on your back. And maybe sometimes you try to stretch your back because it gets tired and it's achy. And so you try to stretch it, but you don't. It may feel okay for a few seconds, but it doesn't really help. And that's because your back is already overly stretched. But now that we have shortened it a little bit, now you can feel the stretch. It actually now will be productive. And then inhale and come up. And with your eyes closed and sitting in mountain pose, just noticing your body. Also noticing your breath, noticing your mind, the quality of your thoughts. So a couple of questions were for reflection. Am I moving my spine every day in an intentional way to keep myself functional and able to participate in my life the way I want to? Do I think that doing that would help to improve the quality of my life? Am I ready and willing to make room for a simple practice that would help me to feel better, breathe better, and be more aware, more mindful of my life? And just finally, how can I bring Kriya Yoga actively into my everyday life if I don't already do that? And if I do, how can I add to that or increase the amount of time of practicing it? Bring your hands together at your heart. Bow your head. Thank yourself for taking this time. Thank yourself for recognizing that you're worth it. May we have faith to know the divine enriches us, invigorates us, is present with us throughout our day. I thank you for your attention and for allowing me to go on this journey with you. We are all fellow travelers. Namaste. Okay.